Hi, I'm Emily Hahn. I am a naturalist, a writer, and teacher. My work focuses on intersections of nature, culture, food, and plant medicine. So I do many things from writing books to teaching online courses and in-person workshops and nature walks, writing recipes, all kinds of things to really help people connect with the natural world around them.
Welcome to the Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world.
Thank you. How has being part Vietnamese, what does it mean for you?
That's an interesting question. I think it's something that that I've thought about throughout my life and probably kind of shifts, in different types. So that's a question that I probably thought about for much of my life, and it's kind of shifted and meant different things at different points. I think it growing up with Vietnamese as my primary language until I was about the age of 5, and in some ways I think being Vietnamese is that language and something that's really like embedded deep within me. Although today I can barely speak Vietnamese, so I can kind of understand, but I'm so out of practice that and yet it's still something that I think the sounds is something so deeply familiar and comfortable, comforting. But that's something that that being Vietnamese means to me. I think traditions that I learned, from family, from food and herbs and stories, holidays, things like that, has been an important part of my experience. So even being half Vietnamese, I think it's something that, or not quite half, almost half Vietnamese, something that that I do, think about in terms of what does it mean to be kind of integrating multiple cultures and identities, as a part Vietnamese and part Vietnamese American person.
Right. We talked on a little bit on the pre-interview. How much Vietnamese culture, or how much do you have to have inside of you, and what does that even mean to be saying, how Vietnamese you are, right? Because that's something we explore a lot. Is that something that matters to you, or is it something that is a natural kind of thing that's inside of you because of your experience?
Right. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. And I'll at different times in my life or different moments that I have, sometimes even still today, I'll get caught up in thinking, what percentage Vietnamese am I, or how much Vietnamese culture did I grow up with, or do I still use today? And trying to measure it that way. But, I think I really realized that, to me, that's not really what makes me feel Vietnamese or makes me feel connected to Vietnamese culture. It's those other things like my family, my food, thinking, connect, like acknowledging my ancestors, things like that that make being Vietnamese or make me feel like that I am Vietnamese.
You have a very interesting lineage to Vietnam, not well, of course biologically and of course culturally, but through your mother. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting. My father is Vietnamese Chinese and actually grew up in Cambodia. So there's kind of multiple cultures and ethnicities and nationalities, within his family experience that passed down to me. And then my mother is Anglo-American, but she in college, she read some work by a Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, and became very inspired and reached out to him and wanted to help his efforts. And so she ended up moving. He was exiled in France at the time, and she ended up moving to live with him in France and learned Vietnamese and ended up translating many of his books into English, and then was basically sent by him to rescue Vietnamese boat people. And so she went on a boat in the South China Sea, and she met my dad, who was basically the first mate on the boat. So so, even though, she is being Anglo-American, I also absorbed a lot of, language from her, as well as customs, traditions, recipes, things that she had learned during her time living with Vietnamese people. And so, that's another thing I kind of try to tease out sometimes too. I learned some things from my father or his mother and his siblings and that part of my family, as well as other things from my mom too.
What year did your mother go to Vietnam?
Oh gosh. I don't remember exactly the year. And she didn't actually go to Vietnam. She ended up going to Thailand and Singapore, and they kind of traveled around. My dad, the ship they were using had left from Cambodia, and so they were kind of going many places.
So this sounds like it's after the war, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, because she is traveling on the periphery of Vietnam.
Right. She wasn't actually in Vietnam. Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like she was sort of moving around, kind of transient for a few years.
No, it was much shorter. I think it was a few months, shorter period of time than that. I think it basically, I think she kind of got thrown into this, not exactly knowing, what she was in for, but she spoke Vietnamese and then she spoke English, which was, I think, really they were looking for somebody who could help them, maybe get through some of the red tape and things like that by speaking English. So that's.
Now I know that this is going to be a strange question because you're not your mother, but I would love to hear what you think. How do you think that whole experience changed your mother?
Oh, I think profoundly. I'm certain. I think she was already very idealistic and an activist, and had been arrested for protesting the Vietnam War in the U.S. and things like that. So I think she was very, I think, just ready for anything and went, but I can't even imagine. I don't think she probably even imagined what she was really in for. As she was going off on this this refugee ship and meeting these people and then meeting my dad and I often think about how brave she must have been, but also probably because she probably didn't know exactly what she was in for. She was young and willing to do that.
Does she still talk about the experience with Thai at this moment during these last few years?
Yeah, we have actually been talking about him more recently. He is very elderly now and has gone back to Vietnam. And I grew up throughout my childhood. We would often see him. We would go to retreats and we spend time with him and things like that. And it was kind of funny for me in some ways. Like he kind of felt like he was a family member. I mean, he was a revered teacher, but I think there's some stories about me, when I was little, and I would sometimes just speak to him in a very familiar, way in Vietnamese, and maybe not proper, but I really felt very, very fortunate to have that experience growing up. And then, as I got older and moved away from home and, things changed. It has been a long time, since I've seen him or since my mom has seen him too. But I think we both just recently, I was able to visit my mom and we were talking about just what a profound impact, he's had on our lives, just, from particular, Buddhist teachings and meditation practices, but really just our everyday life, just the way that we approach things and see the world. And I'm really very grateful for all that.
So what was he really like? Do you have a sort of a description of like his personality?
It was funny. I think about when I was a little kid, and sometimes I would actually be a little bit of I would be nervous because he would always want me to sing. He would love, he loves, I think, songs, and so I would, being someone who I think was more introverted and it didn't like singing in front of other people, I was always a little bit worried, is he going to make me sing? But he was, such a warm and truly very grounded in peaceful presence. And I mean, really, as much as on one hand, maybe he seemed like a family member or something, and I could feel that special presence of his. And just the way he would, drinking tea with him and things like that. It's really wonderful moment.
It's interesting, like when somebody like me who's really on the outside of all of that kind of Buddhist culture, and when I read something about a new guest like you, and I get introduced, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you should check out Emily and who she is," and so I'm reading, and it's really just a lot about your work as a in the herbalist community and nature community, but it sometimes, or most of the times for me, I could see the lineage of how things affect you, and how things sort of rub off on our childhood, and these wonderful things that we meet and encounter. And I just extrapolate, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's sort of like where the love of nature probably comes from. Is that true, or am I way off?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely correct. And some of it has been, I think, more consciously in my mind, and some of those things I come to later is like, oh yeah, of course, that's why I have a certain perspective on interdependence of plants and animals and people, and things like that. It's like if I was steeped in that from a young age. I think one of the experiences that I feel like I trace a lot of that back to is so with Tai we would do tea meditations, but with the children he would often do tangerine meditation. So we would have each have a tangerine, and we would be peeling and experiencing and eating that tangerine in this mindful way, like people might do with tea. But it was wonderful for children, and just that being present in the moment, and the sensory aspects of being with that tangerine, and seeing, he talked about seeing the whole world, in your cup of tea or in that tangerine. So it's the sun and the rain and the farmer, and the bees, and everything encompassed within that. And so when I look at how I approach herbs or connecting with nature, it really does all trace back to that kind of perspective.
How lucky and fortunate you have to be to have got to experience that wonderful exercise.
Yeah, I do feel very fortunate, and to hopefully be able to weave it in some way into the work that I do.
Another person that came up was Cesar Chavez, that came up in my reading about you.
Mm-hmm. When I think about kind of the big influences on my young life, and still kind of my perspective today, would be those two people. And he's another person, brought into my life by my mother. She had participated in a lot of his boycotts, for example, like grape boycotts, and because of the pesticides used on the crops. I guess in the 80s. And so I grew up, going to marches and things with him. And when he would come to, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. And when he would come to town, my mom would actually cook he would eat like vegan meals. So I don't think there weren't a lot of like vegan people in Texas. So, people knew of my mom, and they asked, if she would do that. So he was not someone that I was spend as much time with, or felt not as close to in the same way that I felt with Thich Nhat Hanh, but just going on those protest marches, or just seeing what he did, and I think really affected just my sense of social justice and environmental justice and things like that.
Now, these two people are major figures in the world, in our modern life. They've been they've made huge impacts in the way we exist. I guess my question is, when you follow the trajectory of what they've done, are they doing massive strokes, or are they doing like little bits at a time that has incrementally moved the world? Or, I mean, if you kind of analyze the way that they have shifted our thinking, in what way what's the velocity that
Mm.
are they special people? Are they like these giants that are able to do it, or is it just like these small little steps? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, like you said, I mean, we kind of see the impact that they, standing here today, we see the impact that they've made, and it can seem, really huge and broad. And I mean, it is, they have had massive impact, but, and it's even sometimes something that I look at like, okay, these are my teachers, like they did this, these like massive impactful things, and what am I doing here? Kind of, but then having seen, I guess, some of like sitting there eating tangerines, with a group of children, or going from city to city doing marches, and meeting the people there, and I see that those big things are made up of those like individual actions, and that they were, and consistently over time, I think, for them, it wasn't just one big act of protest, or something like that. It was for their, has been for them, over a lifetime, and affecting, and I think that they did have had something special within them, but it's also because they connected to so many people, and through thousands of people across the world, able to have that impact, because it's not just them, it's like the greater communities that they've helped create and foster.
So growing up as a little girl and coming into contact with these figures, what did you want to do?
Like professionally, or
Yeah, like growing up, did you have dreams of becoming a farmer, a scientist, a writer? I mean, what was going on through your mind as you're experiencing these people through your mother, and actually directly through these people?
Yeah, that's yeah, I think I had lots of various dreams. I think I wanted to travel, I think, because through them I saw kind of, and other people in my life when I was young, world outside of just San Antonio, Texas, and stuff. So I saw that. I did, I would write a lot. I would create like little publications, like little magazines. I made something called the Children's Peace magazine. So I was always really interested in like publishing stuff. So, and I think with some sort of purpose. So like a peace movement, or I became a vegetarian when I was 5 years old. So I was often interested in creating little publications to encourage people with vegetarian recipes in them, things like that. But I had all kinds of interests. I wanted to be a scientist and a musician and this and that. Yeah, I think I there were all kinds of, it wasn't just a one track vision of what I was going to do. And since then I have done all kinds of things. I did work in publishing. I was an art librarian for a while. I worked in finance because I needed some work. And so, so it's been, kind of a path that's included many different strands in it. So that brought me to where I am now.
You sound like a true creative. So when you got into university, and you began to sort of study the world, I mean, how were you narrowing the path or your direction?
So at that time, I was really interested in, well, still kind of that vision of publications and books. And so I was really interested in I studied art history and the history of the book and printing, throughout different eras, from like early printing presses to more modern avant-garde book arts and things like that. But I guess I was just always really interested in these combinations of like text and image, and in these forms that these forms of books or publications that people could hold in their hands. And so that kind of was what I did for a while.
That's an interesting branch of interest.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about like Heidelberg and lithograph and that kind of like printing,
Yeah,
like serious
yeah, yeah.
printing.
Yeah. There was a time when I thought, I was going to become a letterpress printer or something too. That was another path that, I thought about.
There's a very fascinating letterpress printing company in LA that you can
Hmm.
go and see it. They're on the corner of, I think, 7th Street near Hoover or something like that. They're called Aardvark.
Hmm.
Aardvark, and they have these. I think they even have like these old printing press that they put the alphabets. What do you like the
Yeah,
fonts
like
or
the
whatever,
type. Yeah.
the
Hmm.
types, yeah, the
Hmm.
types on, and they load it in, and then
Oh, neat.
these arms, pick up the ink, and it just does that. It's really fast.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So that was kind of, I think, maybe my trajectory for a while. But I throughout this, for a very long time, I was really interested in food and cooking, and I loved that. And I was working as an art librarian when my husband was working for a website called Apartment Therapy. And they had a sister site called The Kitchen, which was all about food. And he basically signed me up to start writing about food. And at first I was really angry at him. I was like, I love cooking, but I don't write, about this, or I don't create recipes. But it ended up becoming a passion. And so I really, really got into writing recipes and, helping other people cook in their own kitchens. And
What did your husband do at Apartment Therapy?
he was an editor, so he writes about design and technology. So he was a graphic designer and then a product designer who ended up becoming a writer, like basically writing about those things.
This is a
And
random
then
question,
sort
but
of roped me in, roped me into that too.
yeah, this is a random question, but have you ever ran into a person named Vanessa Vargas over at America
Oh
Apartment?
yeah. Hmm. Yeah,
She's an
we
old
all worked there at around the same time. Yeah.
friend of mine.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I remember her. She's an interior designer. My family, we
Hmm.
manufacture textiles from Vietnam.
Oh wow.
And so all the
Oh
LA
cool.
interior designers I was very close with. And Vanessa and I were friends for many years, and we still keep in touch on Facebook. But I remember her writing for Apartment Therapy. So it just,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen her in a long time, but yeah, we definitely did those early days at apartment therapy.
oh, what
We
a
would hang
small
out.
world. Yeah, very
Funny.
interesting. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you were writing for food for this spinoff of, or the
Hmm.
sidearm of
Yeah.
Apartment Therapy. And
Hmm.
what kind of articles would you write?
So I would write farmers market reports. I would go to different markets, usually the Hollywood farmers market on the weekends, and I would take pictures and talk to the farmers, and I would kind of do like a little seasonal report
Mhm.
of what was in season, related recipes, um, different cooking tips and things like that. Or around that time, I would be writing usually like a recipe a week, and so a lot of the times I would just call on trying to think of what to do would be the recipes from my childhood. So I would do like Vietnamese recipes, but making them vegetarian. That's how we would eat them. Either growing up or what I would how I would do now. So it's a lot of like kind of adaptation of
Well,
things. So I would do that. My husband's Korean American, so I was learning a lot of recipes from his mom, and so I'd be inspired by that. I would be doing like Korean vegetarian versions of recipes. So yeah, it was a really good experience just because I back in those early days, the staff was small and we had to write a lot, so it was just like, just
wow.
it, I think in some ways that was great because I didn't have time to necessarily like wait and procrastinate and think about what I was going to write. It was like, just gotta get things out there. So that definitely,
That's good training, right?
yeah, it was good training.
So at what point did you really get into the sort of the herbal, this obviously I've been researching, but this like certified California naturalist stuff. Like how did you transition, or what made you sort of like shift into that?
Yeah, so that was another thing that I think, being in the natural world, spending time outdoors and with plants and animals, and hiking and things was a big part of my childhood, whether it was my family going out and doing something, or just hanging out in the backyard, like in, with our Vietnamese herbs, things like that. And then when I moved to LA, my husband grew up here, and he really loved, hiking and spending time in the natural world. And so that was a lot of his way of kind of introducing me to his city, was us, going to the mountains or the tide pools or the desert, and, spending all this time outdoors. And so that was really, I think, what helped me feel rooted in LA, was that connection with the plants and natural world here, which, people probably don't, that's not usually the first thing people think of when they think of LA is,
No.
nature, but we are surrounded, as a city by many different natural areas. And, for me, I think that was my way of maybe, connecting to where I lived. So as I was doing that, I would learn about the plants and, finding out that plants that were edible or that had, medicinal properties and things like that. And so as I was learning about those, they started infusing their way into my cooking and my recipes and things like that. And so, it wasn't, I think it was just kind of a gradual thing where that worked its way in. And then, and then I think I realized, it wasn't just the flavors or the medicinal aspects or things like that. It was that sense of working with the plants as being a way of connecting to where you are and the world around you, and the mindfulness of the present moment, and things like that. So that kind of became more of the focus of what I would do in terms of recipes, or just helping people spend time outside.
Damn, sometimes when I take these risks of asking like your mom's story and Tiknik Han, and I go on these risks because I don't know how it's gonna tie in to the story. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I'm just flying, just basically on my curiosity, and I'm so glad that we got to talk about that in the very beginning, because it all makes sense to me now. The mindfulness side of things, and your affinity, your curiosity to go into the natural world and explore it in depth. And when I think about this and taking it to going deeper with the subject, what does that mean to be a certified California naturalist?
Oh, right. Yeah. So that was, so there is a program. Many states in throughout the U.S. will have a program that's through, so like most states, like through the university system, will have different programs, like Master Gardener is probably one of the more common ones. I also became a Master Food Preserver many years ago. And then, so they also had this certified naturalist or master naturalist program. So and all of these programs are basically people, you get training and you learn about these subjects, and then with the goal of then teaching and sharing that with other people in the community. So so with the certified California naturalist program, there are many different throughout the state, like different university courses or weekend workshops, or week-long retreats and things like this that people can do in different places to become certified. So I took a class through Pasadena Community College, and it was a biology class. It was field biology, and so we would be, every week we would be going out to different trails and mountains and around LA, and learning about the ecology and the geology, animals, plants, and then creating like a capstone project, and then to then like teach other people about some aspect of that we were interested in. So speaking of books, I made a little book about Toyon, which is one of our native shrubs or trees here in the Los Angeles area. So that's what I did for that. And then as part of that, you can, do different volunteer work or, different things to help other people.
Well, yeah, that sounds so familiar. I think I went on is it a hiking trail?
Oh, is there a trail called, I'm not sure. It's the bright red berries that actually, the story is that Hollywood is named after them because, people who came from the East Coast would see the bright red berries that are in season, during like the winter time, and reminded them of holly, and that's called it Hollywood. I don't know if that's true, but that's the story.
Like a great story, great origin. Yeah, I think there's a hiking trail that I saw, the Toyon Trail, just up in the Pasadena or Altadena area.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what it is, a bright red berry, and so so being a California naturalist is different, because it sounds like it's more like a whole environmental thing, but like an American Herbalist Guild. I know that's not what you went. I think it's your writing partner in one of the books.
Yeah. I'm not a registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild. My co-author and co-teacher.
Correct. But I have to ask what that is too, because that like very interesting as well.
So there's no like formal licensure or anything for herbalists in the United States, but there is this organization, this guild of herbalists that they, have standards for professional practice and education and things, so people can apply to become members of the American Herbalist Guild, based on the studies that they've done and the clinical experience and things like that. So it's a professional organization.
And what do people do with sort of these certifications or degrees? Doesn't sound like there's an actual degree, but what do you do when you pursue the path of, here's my Asian side of me, the practical application of
There are so many different ways, I think, to be an herbalist or to work with plant medicines. And some people they become clinical practitioners, and they work with clients and have health issues. And both of my parents were acupuncturists, so I grew up with herbs in that sense, and was never at all interested in becoming an acupuncturist or going into that path. I think my father really wanted me to take on the family business, but no, I was not interested in that at all. Well, of course, eventually, I did start becoming much more interested in herbs and health and things. But I think I still saw that the clinical path wasn't really what sparked my interest. But that's something that people can do. People can become medicine makers, so they will actually formulate and blend like the teas and tinctures and salves and things like that. There are people who write articles or books, or teach classes, take people out into the field, or teach them how to make medicines. There are just so many different ways, and I think, which has been wonderful, I think, for me just
to be around.
Just to see, there are all these different communities that people can work with, and perspectives, that they can bring, and different plants that they have relationships with and stuff. So it is, it's a really rich world, I think, of herbalism. So for me, I found it was really like helping people connect to the plant and the natural world, like where they live, and nurturing their senses, so they can really slow down and have those relationships and those moments of mindfulness, and as well as teaching people how to make the medicines. I started out teaching more workshops for how to like make drinks and cocktails and things like that, and I still do some of that, but that kind of morphed more into like teaching people how to make herbal remedies just in their own kitchens at home. So I just love being able to help people have that empowerment, to be able to make it themselves.
So can we go back to your mom and dad?
Yeah.
So they both studied acupuncture after they met then, right?
So my dad had started studying in Cambodia. And then, but, then with the circumstances of needing employment and war and, all kinds of things, he eventually, ended up working on this oil tanker, so he was not a practicing acupuncturist or anything, but he had started his training. And then, so then when my parents moved, so after the ship, they lived in France for a while, and then they moved to the US. And then my mom got acupuncture training, went to acupuncture school in the US, basically so she could help him, set up a practice in the US. So they, they shared the practice for a while, and eventually it was really my dad's passion, I think. So my mom was, stopped being an acupuncturist, but he's still an acupuncturist today. He still has 2 offices in Texas that he works out of.
Your mom is an incredible woman. Like,
yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And to have, step in and out of so many different fields and modes of being is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think it has been a really good example to me through my life that, you can do many different things and at different stages of your life. And so that's, I think in some ways that, I was probably lucky to not grow up with some of the more stereotypical Asian, expectations for career and things like that. But I did get some of that from my dad, but yeah,
I
had a good example
so,
there.
So guilty is not the word, but my wife went to Yosan here in LA for a few years. And, she talks about it a lot. She talks about the herbal side and, and I come from such a strange scientific, my brother's really into science, the hard science, and talks about these articles and, living forever because of science. And I'm somewhere kind of in the middle where I think that it's important. Science like that, hard science is important, Western science is important, but at the same time, this herbal side is not talked about enough, I think, in American society. So there's this sort of like this middle, probably this middle area where, and I want to ask you about that. How can I find out, or how can people find out about like scientific studies on herbs, and how could we come to more of a understanding of the herbal world that's not official in like an aspirin or penicillin?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that there are gifts and benefits, to both of the perspectives, or not just 2, but many, different avenues, to health and stuff. So we have the more Western scientific traditions that are super important, as well as a lot of these more traditional herbal practices. And so I think the more that we can like respect and weave the 2 in together is really important. And there's kind of different ways of looking at it, because there are a lot of scientific studies being done on certain herbs, and on one hand, I think that is really important. It is able to prove certain things that maybe haven't been proven in that realm before, and so that's really important. But a lot of times those studies will take like a certain constituent of an herb, like a certain chemical of it, rather than like kind of the more holistic. Traditionally, our ancestors, or and our grandparents, they were eating the whole herbs in their foods or in their remedies, and I think, and also probably spending time with those plants in the places where they lived, and growing them and gathering them. And I think that there's also a really important aspect of that too that would be missing if you just take a pill that has whatever isolated constituents
you don't put you don't put an herb in a centrifuge and just take and pick what.
So but I think there is room for both. My co-author from the Wild Remedies book, and my co-teacher for a course that we teach called Rooted Medicine Circle, Rosalie de la Forêt, she is great at like researching a lot of those scientific studies. So our book together, and then she has another book called Alchemy of Herbs, and she is really great at diving into those studies. And that did like human clinical trials and things like that, and looking at that. So her, her work and her articles, I think, are a great resource for that. Yeah, and I think, and then being able to as much as we can, talk to our elders and the people who do still have those traditions is really important. A couple years ago, I went. Most of my Vietnamese family lives in Boston, and I hadn't seen them for many years. And I went and visited, and because I work in herbs now, they were like so interested in talking to me about the herbs and sharing things that they had grown up with, or remedies that they knew about and stuff. And I mean, I had like an uncle by marriage, and I mean, we probably like only spoken like maybe 5 sentences to each other, like in my life. But like suddenly it was like, we were talking about plants and herbs, and then he was talking about his childhood, and like it was this avenue into connecting. And so I think that's been that was wonderful for me, and I think it can be hopefully for people who have those family members who might have experiences, can be a wonderful way to talk to them. And like I wasn't asking him about his childhood or about the war, or that's, I barely, don't talk to my father doesn't talk to about a lot of that, or my other relatives, but we started talking about herbs, and then suddenly, some other things,
right.
Get shared. So
now, is there much of a difference in the size of the Eastern herb studies or understanding versus the Western herbal realms?
Yeah, I think because, there's probably been a longer tradition and more probably respect paid to the herbal medicine on the Eastern side, that there is like a plethora of stuff on that side. I think and I think that there's a lot of there are a lot of like traditionally Eastern medicine herbs that we can definitely incorporate into our lives, like maybe living in the West, but in a lot of cases, I think it is also really important to learn about the plants that are where you live, and so that they're not necessarily being like shipped across the world and grown on these mass scales everywhere, that as much as we can, I think, try to cultivate plants ourselves, or work with local growers and local herbalists. I think that there's a lot of value in that. So, but at the same time, there are plants that are really special, from Asia, or that that we have like cultural connections to. So that's something I'm always kind of like playing with too, is I have a really love for the California native plants, and so I grow a lot of those and work with them. But I also grow a lot of like Vietnamese herbs, and I have like, they hate the dry weather and like where I am, but I have a little greenhouse to try to keep them happy and where it's nice and humid. And so they may not be like the native plants, but I have a very deep connection to them, so they're also really important to me. So I think people can weave in other plants that are might be important to them, and in different ways.
Our backyard in the Amazon and all of these places are quickly depleting because of deforestation. Whether whatever side of the argument anybody's on, like that stuff is disappearing, period, right? There's no argument. Yeah. Is it something that can be stopped? The loss of all of these natural, powerful resources in places that we are killing?
Yeah, no, I think it is a really important question. And, something that I hope that we can stop, but then sometimes, I think we may be too far gone, and we need to be resilient and adapt to whatever our new world is going to be. But at the same time, working together to do whatever we can to try to to stop those things from happening. I think I hope that in some of the things, like if somebody can start to spend more time connecting with the natural world, like just outside their own door, that hopefully that can can then spark something bigger, that then they can, through that love and connection, with the natural world, just where they are, they can then want to protect it on a larger scale too. And so, and that's something I wrestle with, thinking about, like, when we talk about like these figures, who do really big things and launch, huge movements. And I absolutely think that we do need that, for sure. And that's really important. But then, sometimes thinking about like where my skills lie, or something, sometimes it's maybe less than, or it's not so much like going to, to the Amazon to, stop something from happening. And I'm really glad there are people, who are more, I guess, maybe activist, types in that way. But I'm hoping that, what I can do is just help people maybe change some things in their daily lives so that then they can have that perspective to want to work, for the greater world community too.
Yeah, be more aware of just our local surroundings, right?
Yeah. Because I mean, if we don't even care about, the stuff down the tree down the street, how are we really going to care about, plants and animals in places that, they're so far away? So,
yeah. What are your thoughts on plant remedies and natural remedies in relation to the coronavirus and COVID?
Yeah, that's that can be a fraught question, but I think COVID is so, we're a couple of years into it yet, but it's, still very new and changing all the time. And so there isn't, herbalists don't have a lot of experience in, treating COVID specifically. So, I definitely, I don't think that it's responsible to be, saying like, these are the herbal remedies we can use to prevent or cure or, COVID. I think that can be really irresponsible. But there is a long history of using herbs to help, support our immune systems and to work with certain symptoms and things like that. So I think that, hopefully, if we can be integrating those herbs, into our lives to hopefully just be healthier, overall. And, if we do get COVID and, have some like respiratory symptoms or something that, that there are herbs that, that we could use to help ease that. So I think there's definitely place for it. But I also, I think it's really important for people to know that there's not going to be, or I don't believe, that there's an herbal cure for that.
It's good to know.
Definitely, we need to be listening to the science and our doctors and as well.
Good to know we're not going to be banned on YouTube for
yeah.
Have you been back to Vietnam?
I have never been to Vietnam. It's my whole life. I mean, it's been like my lifelong dream to go, and I think I waited for a really long time to go with my father. And so I was always waiting for a time when he was ready and interested to go. And then finally, a couple years ago, I decided, what, I'm just going to go by myself. Or actually, then I had an aunt who was interested in going. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this. And then COVID hit. So I'm still waiting, but hopefully in the near future.
What do you think it'll be
I'll
like?
be able to do that. I don't know. I think it's like, I guess I hope that in some ways that some things there'll be things that maybe will feel familiar or will make sense in some ways, but I think there'll probably be a lot of things that are, probably feel very foreign and different to me. And I'm sure that will also have me questioning what does it mean to be Vietnamese again,
Wow.
and kind of, thinking about that. So yeah, so I expect it'll be a pretty interesting, at the very least, experience. But yeah, but good thing about not going yet is it gives me a little more time to work on my Vietnamese, so I'll be a little bit more prepared.
There are so many Vietnamese Americans with both parents that are Vietnamese that can't speak Vietnamese that go there, connect, and have a sense of some sort of belonging to Vietnam. And so I think that whatever your whenever and wherever you go to in Vietnam, it's going to be definitely a life-changing experience. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it when you come back one day. And
yeah.
that would be an interesting tidbit, because it's like it'll complete the cycle of full circle with your parents, and there's so much herbs and so much of that sort of like naturally happening in Vietnam from old.
Yeah, I'm so eager to learn about that.
Yeah,
there. So
I really appreciate your time today. We started off as a pre-interview, but it turned out to be this wonderful episode for me, and I've learned a lot, as I usually do with people that I know nothing about. I know nothing about your field, and today was just I'm sure it's just a teaser for all of the information on herbs and that sort of world.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate getting to talk to you.
Emily, I appreciate it. And thank you again.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.